Hi, my name is Kathleen D'Artez, and I'm the Director of Legal Affairs for the Maryland Association of Realtors. By now, many of you have heard that earlier this year, our legislators in Annapolis enacted some changes to the agency law, that Governor Hogan has signed these changes into law, and that the changes are effective October 1st. The purpose of this short video is to explain 1. The changes in the law, 2. How those changes will affect the forms that you know and love, 3. How those changes will affect certain disclosures that have to be made, and 4. How the changes will make your lives easier. Seriously, easier. If we want to keep this video short, let's jump right into it. There are 3 main changes to agency law. First, you will only be required to provide the agency disclosures to unrepresented parties. Second, at open houses, a sign will replace the disclosure form, the understanding who form. 3, no more presumed buyer agency. Let's address each of these substantive changes. First, the legislation focuses agency disclosure on unrepresented parties in the transaction, rather than requiring repetitive disclosures every time a represented party interacts with another agent in the transaction. So, as an example, if you are a buyer's agent and you are showing a home to a buyer and the seller happens to be on the way out as you and your buyer client are on the way in, what do you have to disclose to that seller? If the seller is represented, meaning there's a listing agent, you don't have to disclose anything. If the home is a FSBO, meaning that the seller is not represented, you do have to disclose to the unrepresented seller that you represent the buyer. So you would have the seller sign the understanding whom form. So far so good, right? In addition to the written disclosure, if you are representing a client and your first contact with a prospective buyer or seller is not a face-to-face contact, you need to let them know who you represent. If you receive a sign call, you have to tell the prospective buyer on the phone that you represent the seller. If you receive an email or a text, you would disclose who you represent through email or text. Pretty much common sense. Second, the legislation specifies that when a seller's agent conducts an open house for a seller, the seller's agent does not have to provide the agency disclosure to every prospective buyer who asks a question or a certain type of question about the property. Instead, it is sufficient for the seller's agent to conspicuously display a sign that explains to all prospective buyers that the agent present in the house represents the seller. The Real Estate Commission has prepared the notice, and effective October 1st, it is required that the seller's agent conspicuously display that notice. The notice reads as follows. Attention prospective purchasers, please read this sign carefully. This is to advise you that the agent who is conducting this open house represents the sellers and is required by law to promote the interests of the sellers. Any information you give this agent is not considered confidential under the Maryland Real Estate Brokers Act and could be disclosed to the seller of this property. You, as a buyer, are entitled to have someone represent you as a buyer's agent if you are interested in this property. The duties of a buyer's agent include helping you to evaluate the property, prepare an offer on the property, and negotiate in your best interests. The seller's agent can add additional language to the sign-in sheet, can have t-shirts printed up with any additional language, whatever additional steps that he or she might want to take, but you are required to conspicuously display the notice prepared by the Maryland Real Estate Commission. It's definitely easier than having numerous people signing the understanding whom form. Third, the law eliminates presumed buyer agency. Under the current law, there are 2 types of buyer agents, the presumed buyer agent and a buyer agent. A presumed buyer agent is not required to enter into a written brokerage agreement with the buyer until the buyer is prepared to make an offer. However, a regular buyer's agent is required to enter into a written agreement before working with the buyer. The concept of a presumed buyer agent originally came into play when the industry transitioned from a market where buyers were represented by subagents, who were actually working for the seller, to a market where sellers are represented by seller agents and buyers are represented by buyer's agents. Beginning on October 1st, 2016, all buyer representation must be pursuant to a written buyer agency agreement. If you do not have a signed buyer agency agreement, you do not represent that buyer. In addition to the 3 big changes, there are some relatively minor changes to existing agency law. The new law clarifies current practice regarding who can be a dual agent, only a broker or branch office manager, and eliminates the use of the term cooperating agent, which had been used interchangeably with subagent. Previously, neither of these terms had been well defined in the law. So, what is a subagent? Remember, going forward, this is the only term that we will be using. The new law clarifies that a subagent, 1, is not affiliated with or acting as a listing agent, 2, is not a buyer's agent, 3, has an agency relationship with the seller or lessor, and 4, may assist a buyer or lessor in a non-agency capacity. I know what you're thinking. It's almost the end of August. There isn't much time until October 1st. Panic. While it is true that October 1st is right around the corner, there's no need to panic. A lot has been happening behind the scenes. The Maryland Real Estate Commission has been revising and updating the forms to comply with the new laws. They have been updating the content of outlines, PowerPoints, etc. for folks who will be teaching the new agency law courses. And they have been offering Train the Trainer classes to current agency instructors, 3 sessions with more being offered in the fall. And here at MAR, Colette Massengale, who as most of you know staffs the statewide forms committee, has been updating forms for these and other changes required by law. MAR will push out the revised and new forms to the vendors, .loop, zip forms, etc. So all of the forms will be uploaded and available before October 1st. And finally, MAR's legal department will come to your local board or association or to your brokerage to explain the changes. If you would like one of us to attend, you can call the main number, 1-800-638-6425, and ask to speak to anyone in the legal department. And that is the end of our quick update on the new agency law. You will be receiving more detailed information as we get closer to October 1st. I would encourage you all to take a CE class on the new and improved Maryland agency law. Thank you for your time.